Hello again, and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com, and today's sample essay is a little bit different than what I've shown you so far. Today, instead of showing you one of my essays, which is supposed to be a perfect essay, I want to show you a less than perfect essay. This essay came from a student of mine a couple days ago, and I would say it would score about 20 points. That's not great. 20 points is lower than most of my students want to get. They're usually looking for, 25, 26 points. Some of them want a perfect score. But I think by showing you an essay that is lower scoring and an essay that is full of mistakes, I can help you to identify the mistakes that you are making in your work. Maybe if your score isn't good enough, you're making some of the same mistakes that this student made. And the cool thing about this student is not only has she given me permission to put this essay on YouTube, but she's given me permission to put all of her future essays on YouTube. So if you watch this series of videos, you might be able to grow along with her. You can see how she's improving her essays, and maybe you can improve your essays in the same way. All right, now, first of all, we should take a look at the question. This is a preference question. It states, which of the following jobs would you prefer to have? A job at a company that offers challenging and interesting projects but few vacation days? Or a job at a company that does not challenge you but offers a lot of vacation days? And of course, it ends with the standard use details and examples to support your choice. An effective essay is usually at least 300 words long. Now, let's start with this student's introduction. Now, a couple things stand out to me that are problematic in this introduction. First of all, she didn't include a background hook. Now, I always state that you should not begin your essay by immediately stating your thesis. Do not start by stating your preference. You need to instead start by introducing the general topic of the essay. She didn't do that. She just started by stating her thesis right away. That's problematic. You can see I left this comment for the student. I asked her to follow the template for introductions found in my guide. I linked to the guide, and I specifically mentioned that she forgot to include a background hook. A couple other things stand out here. Her thesis itself is too long and too complicated. As I wrote in my comment here, it's a somewhat weak thesis statement. She doesn't need to actually state both possible choices. So she begins the thesis by saying, if I were to choose between X and Y, I would choose X. Don't even bother mentioning Y. You don't need to do that. I suggested as a better thesis in my comment here that she could have written, in my opinion, jobs which are challenging are really desirable, even if they have few vacation days. That's more concise. It will help her avoid needlessly wasting time and repeating words, and it will also keep the grammar a little bit more manageable. All right, that's what I had to say about her introduction. She has a few grammar mistakes, including a really sloppy one where she wrote easy instead of an easy. That's also going to reduce her score, but I don't really have time to talk about all the grammar mistakes in this particular essay. Another thing I will mention here, again, she ended with a nice transition, just like I asked for in the template, but she did say, I feel this way for 3 reasons. As I'm going to mention later, you can only really mention 2 reasons in an independent essay. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, getting to her first body paragraph. Now, she started with a topic sentence, and it begins with first. I really like that. So, on a basic level, that's a good topic sentence. First, I want to be where I can improve myself. Well, there's a couple things I didn't like here. First of all, I don't like to see students write about I and me and my in a topic sentence. Instead, I like to see we. Write about all of us. We and our and us. Secondly, I want a more direct connection to the thesis. You can refer more closely to the thesis in the topic sentence. So I suggested that she change this to, first, we can improve ourselves a lot by taking on challenging jobs. So I didn't write I can improve myself. I wrote we can improve ourselves. And I made a reference to challenging jobs. Keep in mind the topic sentence is meant to summarize the whole argument made in the body paragraph. So you should be specific. The paragraph is going to be about challenging jobs, so mention that here in the topic sentence. Okay, so she continued. And then she wrote some nice explanatory sentences. She explained what she meant, and her grammar was pretty good here. She made a few mistakes. She wrote, not just a mean of making money. She should have written a means of making money. And pushing myself to be a better employee. She forgot the article but the grammar's pretty good. Grammar's pretty good. And then she used a transitional phrase, therefore. Ooh, that she's been paying attention to my videos because I'm always talking about that. And then she ended the body paragraph by summarizing the argument one more time, which is pretty good. That's something I generally teach. I like to see it sometimes. But what's missing? What's missing is a personal example. She needs to include a personal example in each body paragraph. Without that, her body paragraph is just too short and it's not properly developed. Like, look at the question. It says use details and examples to support your choice. She didn't use any examples. So I need to see a personal example. And again, in my comment, I ask her to check out the templates in that guide I linked to already, and it'll show her how to include a personal example. Basically, if our topic sentence says we can improve ourselves by taking on challenging jobs, she needs to write a personal example, 3 or 4 or 5 sentences long, which describes a time that she was in a challenging job and she improved herself. Yeah, that's going to be difficult for her. Maybe she's never had a job. Maybe she's never improved herself. That sounds terrible. I'm sorry for saying that. What I mean is she might have to lie. You might have to make something up. Now, the good thing about doing tons of these practice essays is that you're going to get a lot of practice making stuff up. So that's the biggest problem I have with this body paragraph. Even though the grammar's pretty good, even though she's got a topic sentence, even though she's got a nice transitional phrase, she's lacking that example. So her score is going to be pretty low. That's already pushing her down into the low 20s. Second body paragraph. She starts with a topic sentence again. She uses a transition again. Secondly, working at a creative job gives me more opportunities to work with creative people. Okay, so again, she made a grammar mistake, not a big one. She wrote working for a creative job. Has a little preposition problem, not huge. Not going to cost her a lot. And again, she wrote me instead of us. That's not a big problem, not going to hurt her a lot. But there is one big problem. And this seems kind of off topic to me. The prompt asks about challenging jobs and interesting projects. It doesn't mention anything about creative jobs. So sometimes you can get away with changing the prompt a little bit, and maybe she could get away with talking about a creative job instead of a challenging job, but honestly, I don't think so. I think this would be flagged as off topic by the grader, and that would result in a very big penalty. In fact, that is probably the biggest penalty you can get. When I get a score report from a student and it says writing 12 points, or it says independent writing 1.0, I know it's almost guaranteed they got flagged as being off topic. Now, if that happened, probably the whole essay was off topic. But if you've got one body paragraph that's off topic, that's going to be a big penalty as well. And I think that's another thing pushing this student down to a low score. Now, the rest of the paragraph, pretty good. In terms of, grammar and structure, I corrected a few mistakes. She misused an idiom. She said, help me think out of box. Clearly the idiom is out of the box. She used lessons of life instead of the common collocation life lessons. But she expressed her idea pretty well. However, once again, she left out the personal example. And as a result of leaving out that personal example, the entire paragraph is just 3 sentences long. That's too short. You got to write more than that to get a good score on the TOEFL. I'm looking for an entire paragraph of 5 or 6 sentences at least. Now, so what does that mean? Like, you're trying to write these long paragraphs that are like 6 sentences, and they both have a personal example and all these details. Well, that means, like I said, you should only write 2 body paragraphs. I feel that if you try to write 3, they're just going to end up too short. I really think that 3 short body paragraphs is going to score less than 2 long body paragraphs. So keep that in mind. Then she wrote one more paragraph. I don't want to deal with this too much because it has the same issues. She wrote, lastly, I feel more alive when I work than when I rest. I would, at the risk of repeating some vocabulary, it's probably better to say more alive when I am challenged at work than when I rest at work. So again, you're hooking in a bit more directly to the prompt. You're staying on topic. But once again, the rest of the paragraph is pretty good. She used a transition like however, which I really like. And she expressed her explanation. Once again, though, she's lacking a personal example. Generally, though, I need to point out that while I've said the grammar is good, the grammar is a little bit more simplistic than it should be. She's using a lot of simple sentences. I want to see more complex sentences. I want to see more compound sentences. That's something I would probably talk with the student one-on-one with, and I'd probably give her a few examples. Keep that in mind in your own writing. When I show more of her videos, grammatical complexity is something I'll focus on a little bit more. Of course, there's a conclusion here as well, and I made a couple of comments about the conclusion. First of all, she needs to go back to the guide I linked to check out the template, because the template will show her how to write a 2-sentence conclusion. 1 sentence to repeat the thesis, and then 1 sentence to summarize the supporting reasons. She didn't do that here. merely she just restated the thesis. That's insufficient if you want a good score. Lastly, in my final comment, I wrote that this essay is way too short. She wrote just 290 words, but as I said, I need to see between 380 and 400 words for this task. Now, I did play sort of a dirty trick on this student by putting in this line. An effective essay is usually at least 300 words long. That will probably show up on the TOEFL when you're taking it at the test center. And you're going to think, that means I should write 300 words. Well, no, not really. Note that it does say at least 300 words. So you can treat 300 words as the bare minimum. You should write more than that. You're not going to have enough details. You're not going to have enough examples. You're not going to have enough vocabulary if you write just 300 words. Moreover, it says an effective essay. I don't even know what, in terms of scoring, I don't know what that means. Maybe for ETS, 21 points means that the essay is effective. However, probably for most of you, that score is too low. So do keep that in mind. That's a comment I make in essays almost every day. All right, I'm going to leave it at that for this essay, but I will mention if you want your essays checked in the exact same way that you've seen here on the screen, you can sign up at my website. I'll try to put a link in the video description. And if you keep watching this channel, you should be able to see more essays from this actual student. And in addition, I will upload more of my own essays, which are, meant to represent like a 29 or a 30-point effort. All right, I am going to leave it at that, but if you have any questions, let me know. I am here for you as always. Bye-bye, guys.